Hi, I'm Tom Payton, Director and Publisher at Trinity University Press. Thanks for joining us for the Maverick Book Club. As a nonprofit cultural and educational publisher, we're committed to an evolving agenda of work that engages, questions, and brings us together as a community in productive ways. The new book, the Kronkosky Foundation Story, Creating Profound Good Through Community Philanthropy, captures the 25-year history of the Albert and Bessie Mae Kronkosky Charitable Foundation. Albert and Bessie Mae Kronkosky were committed to a legacy of profound good through charitable giving across 4 Texas counties. The private foundation, which was formed with the mission focused on health and human services, especially for children and the elderly, as well as arts and culture, has had a significant impact on San Antonio and the surrounding areas. And we at Trinity University Press are honored to play a part in telling their story. Please join me in welcoming the book's author, INGRID PETTY, along with TULLOS WELLS, Managing Director of the Foundation, PALMER MOE, former Managing Director of the Foundation, and Eric Cooper, President and CEO of the San Antonio Food Bank, who will be joining us briefly, as well as, of course, our moderator and friend, Bob Rivard, founder and lead columnist of the San Antonio Report. You can order the Kronkosky Foundation Story at tupress.org or by using the link in the chat screen during this program. And you'll also get a 20% discount by using the promo code Maverick11. And please don't forget to check out the book we'll be talking about next month, in January, The Changing Face of San Antonio, in a robust discussion with the author, Nelson Wolff. You can also order Wolff's book in advance with the discount. And now please welcome Bob Rivard.
Thank you, Tom Payton, and thank you, Bergen Streetman and everyone at Trinity University Press, and congratulations on publication of the book. We'll jump right into it and start with our founding managing director of the Kronkosky Foundation, Palmer MOE. Palmer, thanks so much for joining us today. You're the only one among us that ever knew a Kronkosky, and so you were there at the beginning. I still remember the lunch where you asked me if I knew who the Kronkoskys were, and I had a blank look on my face because I had never heard the name or met the couple. Who were they, and what were their interests, and how did they come to this extraordinarily generous decision to create the family foundation?
Well, I never heard of the Kronkoskys either, Bob, but they were a very private people. They lived in their house with sort of 50s furniture. I mean, they were very frugal about what all they did. They were, on the other hand, they were very generous. They actually, the home property in Bernie was sold at a bargain price to the Benedictine sisters. And over the years, they did a lot to help them fence the property and made contributions, often went out there for dinner, I think. They also built a chapel in the Santa Rosa section of South Texas Medical Center that I know Bessie Mae was real proud of. I did not know Albert, but I spent a lot of time with Bessie Mae. She was a delightful person. She had a good sense of humor. In fact, when we were over kind of getting things going on the foundation at their house, someone said, "Oh, that's a nice piano. Do you play the piano?" And she said, "No, Albert did, but he wasn't very good at it." I think that they really had a generous heart, and I think that's what led them to decide to form the foundation. I think Albert also hated paying taxes, so I think that had a factor in his decision. I don't recall if it's in the book, but the foundation benefits 4 counties: Comal, Kendall, Bear, and Bandera. And the Comal County is where his parents first resided when they came to America. Bandera County was a place where Albert would go for coffee with a bunch of old timers in a coffee house, and I think part of their ranch that they had just east, rather west of Bernie, was in Bandera County. They lived and had their businesses here in their county. And the old homestead was actually in Bernie, so that kind of accounted for the 4 counties.
Thank you, Palmer. Your voice is breaking up just a little bit. I think I'm going to turn to your successor, TULLOS Wells, as managing director. And TULLOS, the Kronkowskis had very specific ideas of the beneficiaries that they wanted to reach after their deaths. And how did they come to settle on the areas of interest and in turn, perhaps the areas that they didn't really want to invest in?
It was an interesting story, Bob. Albert and his estates lawyer, Alan Patterson, who's one of our distribution committee members, Alan would be in his office in the NBC building, and Albert would call and say, "Let's go for a walk." And so Albert would meet Alan on the Riverwalk, and they would wander the city during a long lunch hour and discuss what Albert and Bessie May wanted to do. And there were a lot of those walks, as Alan has informed us. And it ended up with a broad charitable purposes, human services, obviously, arts and entertainment, obviously, taking care of children, taking care of old folks, all the things you would want a good philanthropic art to do. The interesting part that we've sort of stumbled on over the years, and I know Palmer probably had to deal with this as well, when Alan suggested they add education to the charitable purposes, Albert said, quote unquote, "No, there's plenty of money in education. They don't need my money." I think they were talking about higher education. We certainly have from time to time invested in research that educational organizations perform. But yeah, it was a broad charitable purposes, except he had a bee in his bonnet about education.
Well, it instantly became and remains today the single biggest charitable foundation in the greater San Antonio metropolitan area, even as some other very impressive family foundations have come on board and in fact collaborated with the Kronkowski. It's given away, I believe, $315 million over the 25 years to more than 400 plus organizations, charitable organizations. So that's a lot to get your arms around, Ingrid. You had a long, productive career at Kronkosky, but it wasn't as a writer. And you somehow picked the short straw to become the writer for this book. And it's turned out to be a wonderful product. So congratulations. But talk a little bit about how you did it.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Well, it started out as a project to organize a substantial in-house archive relating to the debut of the foundation and to carry that story through to present day impact. And I think the intention was to create a timeline in a comprehensive format that we could share on our website or otherwise. But the book is the result. It's the records that Palmer's team kept early on were extensive. So I was able to talk about how the foundation came to be, what went into its establishment, what's involved in designing grant-making processes and special initiatives. So it's been quite a journey. I would say from the author's perspective, what was highlighted for me is how philanthropy has changed and even the attitude towards philanthropy since the foundation was established 25 years ago.
Well, the Kronkosky really has been the leader in not just grant making, but in fact, getting organizations, charitable organizations, nonprofits to collaborate across different platforms and areas of interest, offering professional counseling and consulting services to better professionalize some of these organizations. And at some point, I want to get into some of the really big undertakings like the Precious Minds New Connections initiative and all that involved. But first, one of the great success stories, and there's been many success stories and a few failures, and we'll talk about all of them, or as many as we can fit in this hour, but the San Antonio Food Bank that Eric Cooper inherited when he came into town, 15, 16, 17 years ago, Eric, was nothing like the San Antonio Food Bank we know today. And maybe you can just paint a picture of what you found on day one in the job, and how you connected with PALMER MOE and things transformed from there.
You bet, Bob. Well, again, congratulations, Ingrid and TULLOS, on an incredible book. And, you know, in 2001, 20 years ago, I was hired to be the CEO of the San Antonio Food Bank. And at that time, we had a $1 million cash budget, and we were putting out about $14 million a year in food. And we were struggling. The board was faced with some negative revenue and some high expenses. And so they were kind of passing the hat to make payroll, so to speak. And we had probably a challenged reputation. We'd gone through 4 executive directors in 2 years. And so United Way was had us at bay. And, you know, the core of the food bank is getting food from those that have it to those that need it. And it's through trucking and transportation. And we had 4 vehicles. The youngest vehicle had about 250,000 miles on it. That was the baby. So the rest had a whole lot more. We lacked refrigeration. We you know, the drivers didn't have AC in the cabs. It was pretty rough. So I, in being hired, was trying to get the lay of the land for San Antonio and was reading about the Kronkosky Foundation. So I started in August, and by October, Palmer came to take a tour to see what was going on at the food bank. And I can remember walking in the warehouse, and he understood. I think he had a job in college working in a warehouse, and understood a little bit about forklifts and logistics, and quickly pointed out that our forklift was struggling. And I said, yeah, that's not the only thing. And but I said, look, Palmer, if you could consider supporting us, you know, what we're trying to do is trying to get food to, at that time, 16 counties in Southwest Texas. And so Palmer connected the counties they cared about at the foundation with the counties that were a part of our area. And we had several hundred nonprofits that we were providing food to. And these nonprofits were serving seniors and children and the homeless and veterans and, you know, just every population in need. And I said, but all of this is being threatened because, you know, I don't have the vehicles. If you try to call me back, I don't think I can answer the phone because our phone system doesn't work. And he said, well, you know, let me talk to the board and we'll think about it. But, you know, we haven't ever funded the food bank. And but that November, December, I got a call then from Palmer, and he said, hey, you know, we talked a little bit about your needs, and the foundation would like to make a $600,000 gift to the San Antonio Food Bank. And when you think about our budget being $1 million, that was 60% of our total operating budget. And we were strapped for cash. And for many nonprofits, that temptation to maybe take the money that you asked for and use it for something else is there, right? I mean, I didn't know if I was going to make payroll, but this was to buy 4 new trucks, to buy forklifts, to buy a phone system, and to put us on a path towards success. I think, Palmer, you said, I mean, you kind of made the connection. You're like a food foundation. You with an investment can multiply that investment in food, and it was, I mean, we were transformed. It changed the trajectory. It pulled us out of where we were headed, and I hope the Kronkosky Foundation and all those that are involved are proud of us today.
Well, before we have Palmer react to that, Eric, just remind our listeners in the audience today the size of your current budget, how much food you're giving away to how many people annually, because it is extraordinary.
Yeah, Bob, and I'm humbled because in some ways, right, the trajectory of the food bank has really been to address the need, and we were so far behind at that time. But our current operating budget's about $32 million. And last year we distributed about $160 million in food. And so just that ability to offer very robust programming to help meet people's needs today, tomorrow, and for a lifetime. And it's just a complex organization. But I think that impact would have never been realized if it wasn't for these incredible gifts that came from the Kronkosky Foundation, and they came at the right time. We're going to talk a little bit about this, but their process, it gave others the confidence to then support the food bank. I mean, because our credibility was being questioned, and then once the Kronkosky Foundation funded us, everybody else felt like they could do it too. We matured. There was a maturation process that occurred in this gift giving. I can remember, like, what do you want? And they're like, well, you said what you're going to do. You just do it. And I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have committed so much. Right. So, but it was this process of helping us be who we could be. I think of the Kronkosky Foundation very much as a coach on the sideline, helping us tap untapped potential and really becoming who we should be.
Palmer, those were in the early years of the foundation's operations. That was a big gift, $600,000. That was more than just a rusty forklift that you saw.
But we had several large gifts in the early years, and Eric's story, I think we probably have 25 or 30 more stories just like that, all because of the generosity of the Kronkoskys to want to really have an impact, a positive impact in our community. It's the food bank is one of the best success stories. Of course, Eric is one of the top CEOs of nonprofits in San Antonio, so we're really glad that we were able to be a part of it.
Bob, let me follow up on that, if I may. First of all, first thing I learned when I got to Kronkosky was I tried to establish a philanthropic CEO of the month, and every month it was going to be Eric, because he really has been iconic there. And I'll go into that in just a second. But let me give kudos to Palmer, because Eric mentioned two things that were transformative to our community. The first was Palmer wasn't looking to sprinkle money around the community. I mean, he took a big chunk of our then distributable income and said, we're going to make a big bet on the food bank. And he did that with other organizations. And when you get to Precious Minds, you'll have a chance to hear him out on that. So that really was different in our community. And the other thing it did, and the thing that Eric taught me when I got to Kronkosky was, and it goes back, Bob, to the issue of, why do we do a book? And it really was, Eric taught me early on that one of the most important things we do besides give away other people's money is to help create and enhance a culture of philanthropy in the communities where we do work. That's really what Palmer did by making big, impactful gifts, by setting up a grant structure that was well regarded as the most rigorous around. And to Eric's point, if you get a grant from Kronkosky, you can get a grant from anybody, because it was, and we have continued it as a rigorous system. So that the way he started that out to make it so rigorous, and the fact that the book has, I think, and I hope, helped others better understand how to build a culture of philanthropy in our different communities.
Ingrid, to add to the narrative of the book, you invited Eric and a number of other community leaders, both on the nonprofit side and on the philanthropic side, to pen really first-person essays about the impact of the Kronkosky Foundation on their own operations or enterprises. And that turned out very well. Those are all in the book. And I think readers will find those of real interest, that people took the time to contribute to the book. Talk about the group of people just a little bit that you invited to write for the book.
Well, we tried to get sort of a variety across the nonprofit groups that the foundation funded, as well as community leadership and institutional leadership. Everybody was very happy to give their comments. They've all been grateful for the work of the foundation, many of whom we've worked in special initiatives and are partnering together now. So that was really, getting that feedback from the community. And that was really when the project became a living, shareable thing for me. When you became working with us on editing what had become a real manuscript, and having that part added in made it just that much more special.
Well, Palmer and Tullos, I want to talk about the fact that one of the wonderful things Ingrid does is tell all of the stories of the Kronkosky Foundation, including the stories that didn't work out as well as all of us in the community would hope they would have worked out. And one that's very much in the news right now is the San Antonio Symphony, which has come to a standstill, and the musicians are on strike, and there's a funding crisis, and no one's quite sure how it's going to work out. But if I'm not mistaken, the Kronkosky's very first gift, Palmer, was to the San Antonio Symphony. That was a real area of interest to Albert Jr. and Bessie May. They wanted to support symphonic music. And Tullos, I think you told me that in the aggregate, nearly $10 million has been given by the foundation to the symphony over the years.
That is correct.
Yet it never quite proved to be the answer.
Well, it's one of those things that sometimes there's just not enough money to fix some things. Yeah, interestingly, the Kronkosky Foundation, just in granting, has done well over $9 million since its initiation to support the San Antonio Symphony. The first gift we ever gave, even before Palmer was on board, Kenny Wilson, Alan Patterson had gotten a call from your old colleague, God rest his soul, Larry Walker, who's the chair of the symphony, and it was on fire. It was going down. They couldn't pay their bills. So our first grant was $300,000 to the symphony in order to pay back payroll and back payroll taxes. And over the next umpty years, we gave just almost religiously every year, except for two. And 16 and 17, when they were struggling on my watch, we gave them $700,000 just in a 2-year period, in addition to the $1 million plus capital grants we had given them previously, and the endowment grant of over $1 million. So Kronkosky, frankly, stood second to no one in terms of our funding for the symphony. It is the largest individual grantee of any that we have ever funded during the history of the symphony.
What lesson do you take away from that? Tell us that would inform future giving. And is there a scenario that you can imagine where the symphony will be reborn and the Kronkosky Foundation could become a funder once again? We absolutely, the Kronkoskys wanted symphonic music. In 16 and 17, we made a pretty bold effort to create a new infrastructure that could support the symphony, make sure it had the financial rigor that it has not been able to maintain. We watched it for years have a $7 and $8 million budget when it reliably could have about $5 or $6 million of revenue. And that's why you saw the dips and the valleys, and they went through their endowment and they filed bankruptcy a few times. I think the San Antonio Symphony, I think symphonic music is very important in our community. I think the symphony is important. I think the musicians are important, but you can't continue something that cannot be reliably sustained by the community. We're going to make another go at that soon, but they got to figure themselves out before we or anyone else, I think, is going to invest in them. Thank you. Let me just take a moment to invite our audience members to scroll down to the bottom of their screen, and they'll see there's a Q&A tab they can click on. And if you want to post a question, I'll do my best to work that. I'll keep an eye on that as questions come in, if any do. And I'll try to work those into our conversation here. And if not, we don't get any questions, we'll have plenty to talk about along the way. And this is a good moment to talk about the Kronkosky really evolving TULLOS and PALMER and INGRID into an organization that started to take a step back, and instead of just responding to grant requests, really reimagining the nonprofit landscape in the city and looking at some of the most intractable problems, child abuse. Let's talk about that for a minute. And coming up with what became the Precious Minds New Connections Initiative, which aggregated more than $40 million among 27 different agencies. And frankly, in a sector, the nonprofit sector, that at times has a very well-deserved reputation of people being more competitive than collaborative. This was really changing the face of charitable enterprises in the city, in my view, as a journalist. And I'd just like you to talk about, whichever one of you wants to take that first, how that came to be. And I regard it as one of the great success stories of the Kronkosky Foundation. I'd like to hear whether or not it met the goals that you hoped it would achieve.
Well, the way it came to be is that we had a process early on of having, I think it's continuing, of having roundtable discussions, inviting experts from different fields to come talk about issues affecting our community. And we had one where we invited over 100 people, invited some outside people to conduct the sessions. And we tried to get to some root causes for some of the issues in a lot of our different areas, whether it was mental health or child abuse or any number of areas of funding. And in that discussion, what came out of it was the importance of child development. And we had a conference, we actually had a conference that invited some experts in brain development. And it became very clear that in the first 3 years of life, that when the brain develops, how the interactions that a child has with the people around them and their community has a significant impact on how those children are going to develop over time. And in dealing with that issue, we'd say, okay, that's the solution to a lot of the problems. We can figure out a way to do it. The solution that came out of those meetings was parent instruction and teaching parents about how important the first 3 years of life would be. And that's what gave birth to the Precious Minds, a New Connection collaborative. And what we did is we invited, I think there were over 100 organizations represented and 200 people actually. And what we asked them to do was to get together in groups and see if there are ways they could collaborate to do this for their populations. And then out of all of that came these 25 to 27 organizations that ended up being funded. And in addition, we looked at 3 different curricula and had those presented. And I think 2 of the 3 were selected. One became pretty predominant. And I didn't have how many people, but I think we were reaching about 8,000 parents a year, as I recall, with these programs that were conducted all around the city.
Tell us,
that's how it was born. I frankly think it's very hard. When you're dealing with 3-year-olds, you're not going to know the impact until they probably get into the 4th, 5th, 6th grade in terms of development. And so it's kind of hard to get your arms around what kind of success you're having. I just know from talking to lots of parents over the years during that program that the program will really have a meaningful impact on the lives of a lot of people.
Bob, let me chime in on Palmer. 2 things. One, we ran over 80,000 parents to Precious Minds New Connections, and all in invested about $52 million in that program. And it was the first of its kind. I mean, one of the most interesting things if you look at our mission statement, the one that was crafted by Palmer and his team, it's about producing profound good. And this is one of the first times in, I think, most communities around the country that a charitable organization like Kronkosky had said, we're going to take a step back and we're going to look at a big global issue and how it might affect folks, not just tomorrow, but year after year after year, as Palmer said. And the science was so good, and it ran for 20 plus years, about 20 years all in. And as I said, 80,000 people went through the program. It was a parent training. We learned some things about what does work and what doesn't work. But at the time it was done, it was one of the most impressive things and one of the most impressive processes that any foundation had gone through to attack a big ticket problem.
So did that process come to a conclusion, TULLOS, or did it plant the seeds for changes and approaches and enhanced funding that continue today in the community to address a problem that, let's face it, never goes away, right? It's a problem we'll always have in the community. Yeah,
it is a problem we will always have. We following Palmer's model. By the way, the other thing that was impressive about when we first started, Palmer realized that most of the organizations we funded did not have the technology to even give us the budgetary and other information we needed. So Palmer's one of his first initiatives was, I think he went out and bought 100 laptops and scattered them around the community to the organization so they could come ask for grants.
They weren't laptops in those days.
Yeah, whatever it was.
Desktops. And a funny story is this happened all at 2001, you know, when everybody was worried about everything cratering. So one of the nonprofits said they ran both systems for a full year to be sure the new one was going to work. And another one was so excited about the decision, they took a picture of themselves sitting at the computer and sent it to the foundation. And the credit for that whole idea came from Kenny Wilson, actually, in sitting through some meetings. But that was our first big thrust, and I think it was really well received by the nonprofit.
It was creative and it was empty. By the way, Megan Cromer is the woman, PhD, Dr. Cromer, who Palmer got to really head up the science on precious minds, new connections, and she stuck with it for a long, long time. It really was her efforts, I think, Palmer, as much as anyone, putting all that together. What we learned from that, Bob, was that, we have a great true story. When I was hired by Kenny and Alan and John, their admonition to me was this: we've got a really great grant process, don't screw it up. But we want to get back to be able to do more. And so when we looked around about doing more, the model of get a bunch of people in the room together. We've done that 3 or 4 times now. The Spurs, thank God bless them, have hosted each one of our summits, as we call them. And we've done it in foster care and child care. We've done it in creating an African-American museum. We've done it in child sex trafficking. We've had several of those summits over the years. We did it in autism, creating institutions that could attack those kinds of issues. The big issue that is our white whale is generational poverty. And to your earlier point, Bob, we've had some successes and we've had some failures trying to attack generational poverty in our community. We're not giving up on it. We're about to take another hard swing at it. But yeah, this community has a lot of problems, and this is a community, because we're relatively poor. We don't have $1 billion foundation in San Antonio. So we in United Way and Area Foundation, and now the NAGEMs and the A's, the Rehees and the Nays, we get together and cooperate really, really well, because it takes all of us to do most things.
If I could add one thing that I think that TULLOS and the group have done is really move forward on the autism area in a big way, I really applaud them for that. I want to just kind of mention one connection that our involvement in that started from a roundtable where we learned that a child, if you discover autism in a young child and introduce the program and treatment available at the time, like 90% of those children could lead a normal life if you caught it soon enough. And the lady that was telling us about that had time to do 5 to 10 families a month. And there were hundreds, if not thousands, of parents that needed that kind of help. And so we set up the Autism Community Center to do just that. TULLOS take that whole program another 50 miles down the road. But what's interesting to me is the key in those early years is brain development. If you get those kids early, the brain is malleable and they can help them have a much better life in the long term. But that's how we got into that one, which they've continued, I think, very well.
I'm the godfather of an autistic, well, he was an autistic boy. He's now an autistic young man. And I watched that effort very carefully, described in the chapter, Ingrid, called Collective Impact, because this is an example, and maybe you or TULLOS can talk about this a little bit, but it really goes to, I think, your work at the foundation before the book was ever contemplated, Ingrid, of bringing groups together and getting them to collaborate instead of compete.
Yes, and the autism project was one of the first when I arrived at the foundation as the director of initiatives and partnerships. The providers wanted a solution to help address the fragmented system of care and to be able to provide the wide array of services that families dealing with autism require, and that change as the child grows older. So it needed to be simpler for families to follow a coordinated roadmap of services, and the providers wanted a more efficient way to deliver that. So we brought them all together, designed what their overall objectives as a group would be to deliver that product. And in the process, we discovered Tab Health, J-Mo Rubin's in his product, which is a customizable information sharing platform, which is exactly what they were looking for. It wasn't something just to make referrals to each other, but to be able to follow the family after that referral had been made and get feedback from them and make sure that all the loops had been closed, and that track the services that they had been provided over time. And so everybody knows what may be coming next for that family and how to best put that in place for them. So that was definitely the kickoff of the foundation helping to design technological solutions to help providers in serving individuals with special needs. Since then, some of the other projects following the same format were designed in fighting the exploitation of children and sex trafficking, now solving for social determinants of health, and in tackling the difficulties of the foster care system.
In that area, related very much is domestic violence. And I'm going to go to a few questions that are coming in from audience members. My Rosemary Fry, who I believe is the Rosemary Fry, my former colleague at the Express News, notes domestic violence continues to be a major issue in the city. Is the foundation involved in any of the community task forces?
At this time, we are not involved specifically in domestic violence. We certainly have funded the battered women's shelter pretty religiously. I mean, it's interesting. This is probably telling inside secrets, and I should not. But as we look at our grant making, one of the things we look at is we're morphing our granting, where we probably give fewer, more impactful gifts, consistent with the notion of if we're going to do something, we need to create profound good. Going back to Palmer's, let's figure out how to use science on brain health to really, move a community through 80,000 better trained parents. But there are things like Battered Women's Shelter and other organizations like that with such a vulnerable population. We call them compulsory giving. I mean, we have to take care of them because if we don't, no one else can or will. The blessing of having $470 million in the bank is we can stretch when we need to make sure we can keep vulnerable organizations from going under. So, yeah, there's a host of things like domestic violence and violence against children and sex trafficking, where we've been pretty ambitious on those. Others in this community are doing really good work as well, and we're happy to write a check and sit back and pom and say, go get them and call us if we can help.
We've talked just a little bit about the specific areas that Albert Jr. and Bessie May wanted to benefit. Palmer, one question from Mike Bacon, who is the Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations at Trinity University, asks you to share more about Bessie May's passion for animals and how that is translated into giving at the foundation.
When Mr. Kronkosky died, there were only a couple of nonprofits that were actually mentioned in the will, but Wildlife Rescue was one of them. And so it's not a huge portion of the total fund, but we've been at least through my years, and I suspect thereafter, it's been an organization that has received really good support from the foundation. We've done some work with the Humane Society. We actually, in one project, they had a building over near the San Antonio Museum. We bought the building so that the museum had the money to do elsewhere with it in terms of construction project. But we bought it from the Humane Society so that they would have the money to help build their other facility. So that's kind of, we've been a supporter of a lot of animal issues, primarily another one that was really a sort of animal related zoo project, which is the Kronkosky Tiny Tot Nature Spot at the zoo. Was a project that was kind of interacting children and the animals at the zoo. So it did some major things in that area. In fact, when Mrs. Kronkosky died, we made it as a $200,000 gift in her memory to the Wildlife Rescue organization, which is out in the Bernie area.
Bob, just to pile on there, we have broad charitable purposes, as I said, that's broken down to several categories in the trust that Palmer and I administer. One of the things that Alan Patterson, who was the dean of our distribution committee and was there putting this together with Albert and Bessie May, said, if it had been up to Bessie May, every penny would have been spent on animals, every penny. So Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation and the Humane Society and many others, we make sure that some portion of our money goes to that issue on a pretty reliable basis, just in honor of Bessie May. One of the things we do is we give a grant every year of $100,000 unsolicited in on behalf of Albert's birthday and Bessie May's birthday. And we get to Bessie May, we're pretty inclined to look to see if there's some way we can help animals in making that gift.
Tullos, I can just imagine executive directors and CEOs of nonprofits in the audience hear you talk about that, and they want to know, how can I compete for that $100,000 birthday gift? And that may give you the opportunity to just talk for a few minutes about your process at the foundation. I know it's a rigorous one, and frankly, it might be a little intimidating to smaller nonprofits that lack the sophistication in their administrative teams. But what would you say to nonprofits? You've benefited 415 of them in the 4-county area, but there are thousands of nonprofits in that area, probably many of which could be beneficiaries if they knew how to connect effectively to the foundation. So talk a little bit about how somebody that would like to get that process started should proceed.
I will. I'm happy to do so, Bob. Thank you. Let me kick off with we use technology to make sure we reach everyone who wants to be reached or who is willing to be reached. The process we use is now virtually, you can do it all online. We are constantly morphing our processes, both in terms of how we impact with the organizations around our communities, as well as how we make it easier for them to operate, as well as we better evaluate the work that they do, because we have a rigorous evaluation. We have a rigorous selection process and a rigorous evaluation process. On the selection process online, if you by and large can plug something in and have a pulse, you can file a letter of inquiry with the Kronkosky Foundation saying, looking at our website, this is what we want to do, and this is what we think we need to do. And we look at those, and we then make a decision which we will accept so that someone can file an actual grant application. The reason we did that is Palmer set it up so, because it is a rigorous process, we did not want to have some organization who may not get the grant spend a lot of time, effort, and horsepower on doing an application that wasn't likely to be accepted. So we are very rigorous at the front end screening, and we are also rigorous in the looking at the application if one is allowed to be accepted. So people don't throw away a lot of money and manpower trying just to get into our system. I think it's pretty user friendly. We have a retired Army Sergeant, Janet Clifford, who runs our evaluation process. We're all afraid of her because she is rigorous on everything. But she is leading our effort to make sure we can make it easier and easier for people to use our process.
We also concluded early on that there were a number of foundations, like the Area Foundation and some smaller foundations, that were making smaller gifts, and it made more sense for them to be in that role in terms of serving the smaller nonprofits.
So is there a team of anonymous people, tell us, that are meeting in a conference room? Are you doing site visits? What's the selection process? And because even with 475 million in assets, you must have to say no an awful lot of the time.
No, often. We certainly say no an awful lot at the letter of inquiry stage. Yes, I mean, one of the blessings that Kenny and Alan put together when this was started, one of the blessings that Palmer created, and I hope I have carried on, is we have a terrific staff in the grant process. I don't know if Palmer even knows this. I don't know if Kenny's watching, but when I was hired, Kenny said, "Okay, TULLOS, it's your bird. You take all of them. For all your employees, keep them, change them, whatever you want to do." As I got to know the people there, I didn't make any changes at all. It was and is a first-class staff. And we still have someone who's been with us 20 years. We've had people who've been with us, 16 years, 18 years. And we have some new folks. So we have really good grant managers, and they go and do site visits, and they ask for information, and they call back. We sort of get everything out of a potential grantee that we need to get to be comfortable. So when we sit down with our distribution committee members, which we do quarterly, they have an easy product in front of them to make decisions about. Because at the end of the day, on many of our grants, they're the ones who make the decisions. So I think it's working softer and easier for people than it ever has, thanks to technology, but the rigor stays with us.
Hey, Bob, I'll just throw out there that was us 20 years ago. We were under capacity, struggling with technology. We weren't fortunate to get one of Palmer's computers either. So we had to try to muster up to the bar, but it was just their process to then bring us along. And I think the example of about 10 to 12 years ago, our second most populated food insecure county that we serve is Comal. And so as we looked at New Braunfels as a potential place to expand our services, there was a brand new foundation, the McKenna Foundation, that was getting started. And of course, we reached out. They had done some studies and found that food insecurity was their #1 issue. As I called on them, the first thing they said was, "We've been meeting with the Kronkosky Foundation." So it's not just helping other nonprofits in the sense of the charitable organizations providing services, but I think the Kronkosky Foundation has been a mentor to other foundations in best practices and how to approach their giving and their strategy. They, at that point, gave us a strategic grant to build then the new Braunfels Food Bank, which has now become the #1 social service organization in Comal County. And we always brag that we were voted the worst place to volunteer. That's in worst fest kind of way. But it's this process of really developing, and the Kronkosky Foundation is good because its people are good. And then they translate that to a financial gift to an organization, but they're also developing the people within it. And I think for us at the food bank, we definitely feel like we were developed. We were the beneficiaries of the gift. And so I think for every nonprofit, you'd love to have a partnership with a foundation where you get a gift every year and they're a staple of your diet. The Kronkosky Foundation has not been that to the food bank. It's been strategic investments at critical times. And it's been in critical times that I think I've gotten that text or call from TULLOS to say, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a winter storm, pandemic, or just a massive economy turndown, are you okay? What do you need? We're there if you need us. Go out and do what you do, get the support. And when you fall short, that's when the intervention comes. And for me, that piece that the Kronkoskys gave and that we've got your back is priceless.
Well, Eric, I think everyone in the community that watched believes the food bank's performance during the pandemic has been heroic. Can't say enough about it. How many counties are you serving in total at present?
We now serve 29 throughout South Texas, so up into San Angelo and down into Crystal City, and it's a large section of South Texas. But we get to work with lots of great nonprofits. Many of them are supported and receive gifts from the Kronkosky Foundation. So those that haven't, I think, feel the effects and benefit of the Kronkosky Foundation. So it's a rippling effect, if you will, either directly or indirectly, that the foundation's had impact.
And tell us, from your perspective, given that Eric is serving 29 counties, and I guess conceivably could set up operations in each one of those counties, you decided to fund Comal because that, in fact, was the place the Kronkowskys arrived at from Europe in the 19th century, and it's one of their 4 designated counties. Or what moved you to agree to fund really what amounted to an expansion of the food bank's physical operations?
I can sum it up in 2 words. Eric Cooper. And because Comal is the 2nd largest county in our jurisdiction, and because Eric's earlier admonition to me is, Comal is the fastest growing county in the country. It's growing like a weed. There's a lot of money coming in there. There's also a very poor part of Comal County. And so a lot of people who drive up and down 35 forget that shiny little place called New Braunfels still has a lot of problems, and growth causes additional problems. So when Eric first talked to us about his expansion into Comal County in a substantial way, by putting a facility there, we absolutely decided to help, because, as he said, continuing to enhance the culture of philanthropy in Comal County will help everybody, not just the food bank, not just X and Y. It helps. It lifts all boats when a community understands the importance of philanthropy and how to be successful doing it.
Ingrid, I want to turn to you because we haven't given you enough opportunity. I meant to ask you earlier in the program, just looking out over the horizon, I wonder if you tell us what the status is of something you write about in the book, which I don't think there's a wide appreciation of in the community, and that's the San Antonio African American Community Archive and Museum. I wonder what the status of that is today, and what that looks like going forward.
Well, that was something that came to us through John Kerr, one of our distribution committee members, who was on the board, or may still be, of Humanities Texas, along with Everett Fly, who was also a member there. John and his other board members had attended a presentation that Everett was doing at the Alamo about African Americans involved during those years, and then had a conversation with him about other history in our region that no one was aware of. There was no documentation, there was no collection, highlighting the role of African Americans in our region. That's how it started. It was a long process, difficult one, to find partners to help in all the moving parts and various pieces that it takes to stand up an archive and museum. We were successful through Everett Fly doing a lot of this, the legwork, working with University of North Carolina Historical Society, and obtaining a grant to help the community build a community-led archive. So it's a long story. It's all detailed in the book. It's come a long way, I think, in the last 5 years. I haven't been involved with it since my retirement. Maybe TULLOS has more of an update on that, but I think that it's really front and center now as a bright star in our county.
Yeah, I'll be crisp. It's a fabulous project, and it really did come out just out of the ground. Edward was a point of contact. As I said, the Spurs hosted a charrette, for lack of a better term. We had over 120 people there who were interested in building something memorable for the African American community in San Antonio. As an amateur historian, I would have been thrilled to know how much of San Antonio's history revolves around the African American community, and the number of African American leaders from pre-Civil War to the present time who have come to San Antonio, an important part of that experience. We have a great new organization, we have a great new CEO and staff, and we're long-term bullish about this museum and archive. Texas A&M San Antonio has become a great partner, Cynthia and Michael Bryan there. So yeah, it's keep your eyes open, because we're going to get out of the ground in a substantial way in the next couple of years, but I think it's going to be a real jewel in San Antonio.
Well, Everett Fly himself may not be a household name, but he's a real asset in the community, a landscape architect by training, but a great historian and individual who's just gone all over and done some remarkable documentation that's earned him the 2014 National Humanities Medalist honor. So he's a great partner to have in that. I want to get in one more question from the audience if I can. I know we're coming up close to the hour here, but this is from Theo Meyer from the University Health Foundation, which itself serves a 28 county region in South Texas. And she notes that you all spoke about the Kronkosky Foundation interest in child health. Can you speak further to this initiative regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, and access to care?
Well, I'll take that one. Yes, I mean, we have, those issues matter to us. One of the things about which I'm proud is we have a very diverse staff. And we have people who are passionate about, on our distribution committee, who are passionate about a number of those issues as it relates to equity, as does Bank of America, who owns the trust. So we've been pleased to help others try to build that in San Antonio. I will tell you what the San Antonio Spurs, in partnership with Frost Bank and others, are doing in San Antonio now on equity issues. I think is important work, and we are joining with them. Our community to work has to work for everybody. We all have seen lots of communities around the country that don't work for everybody. I don't know anyone who's involved in philanthropy in a major way in San Antonio. All the people we partner with every day have stood up and supported this equity effort that the Spurs and Frost Bank have been leading, and Bank of America and many others who have jumped into this, too many to mention. Yeah, if equity, if we don't have equity for our entire community, we don't have equity for anyone.
Well, we're at 7 o'clock, and you know, if you're in the moderator business, finishing on time is important. So I'm going to thank Palmer Moe, who had to leave us earlier, and Eric Cooper, thank you from the San Antonio Food Bank for agreeing to represent all the hundreds of recipients of the Kronkosky's largest over the years. And Tullos, thank you so much. Ingrid, I have to give you the last word and say that everybody says they have a book in them, but not that many people cross the finish line. It's hard work, and it's painstaking work. And this is the fun part now, that you can hold this up and very proudly see that you've done a wonderful job of encapsulating 25 years of profound good. So congratulations to you.
Thank you, Bob, and I appreciate your working with me as editor. It's a real privilege.
Well, that's great. I hope you guys sell lots of books. Any last words? Tell us.
Well, let me say this. I mean, first of all, thanks to Tom and the folks at Trinity University Press. Delighted to work with them. They've been good coaches for all of us. I can't say enough about what Palmer and what he established and the manner in which he established it. And I can't say enough about Eric. I mean, he has been, for a young guy to an old guy, he has been as much of a mentor to me as anybody in this community. This is a community blessed with not a lot of money, but we have a lot of great folks. Thank you, Bob. I mean, the guidance you gave to Ingrid, we would not be here if you hadn't taken Ingrid to be under your wing to get this bloody thing finally done. So we only read the manuscript about 35 times. But thank you for doing this tonight. As always, you're a marvelous moderator. We appreciate your help.
Well, we'll watch with great interest the next 25 years, because they're upon us, and I know that you know, you'll be issuing more grants than ever. Someone posted on my column, Tullos, Sunday, that when I was the editor of the Express News, we used to print quarterly stories about Kronkosky's foundation giving. I don't know whether or not you report that way or not, but if you do have a system in place, I think the San Antonio Report would be happy to be the bullhorn for that in the community going forward.
Janet Clifford can give you the exact dollar amount on any given day or any time of the day as to what we've done in our grant making. So yeah, we'd be flattered to take you up on that.
All right. Well, we'll have our readers watch for that. Thank you again. Thank you, Trinity University Press. Thank you to all of our members of the audience, and have a good evening.